There are people who I think just get stuck in the my anxiety, my depression, my trauma. Trauma is something that you experienced, an awful thing that you experienced, maybe consistently or continuously, but it's an experience. It's not who you are. There are things that you do when you are feeling anxious, when you are feeling depressed, when you are feeling triggered by something that reminds you of that traumatic experience that you had or experiences that you had. There are moments. Hi, my name is Christina DiBernardo. I am the founder and executive director of Expressive Connections Mental Health Counseling. We are a group private practice that offers mental health counseling services to children, teens, adults, couples, families, organizations. We do a lot. And I think what makes us special is I've built a practice that I don't want to turn anybody away. Mental health counseling services, therapy services I get phone calls from people all the time saying that you're the first place that I've called and it's not a 4-week wait or it's not a 6-week wait. And my goal is to always be able to get anybody that we can serve, that we're appropriate to serve, in the door. And so I think that that's what makes us really special.
It's an interesting point right off the bat. I come from a family of mental health services. My mom is a therapist. My sister's a social. They're both social workers, but I guess also they work in therapy.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, they're not. I guess I don't know actually the terminology, so I'm not going to try butchering it. But
That's okay.
I
I'll
know
help
that
you
they
out.
are licensed. They're LSW.
Licensed clinical social workers,
Yes,
LCSWs.
exactly. That being said, my mom talks all the time about how when she tries making referrals, she has problems with referrals because everybody's so booked up. So when somebody needs the services that she's trying to refer out, whether it be specialized services or things like that, they can't. It's not helpful because they need the help now, and they're 6 weeks out where they're not even returning the phone calls. That is a very real problem.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And like I said, we get a lot of calls, especially from parents who
Mm.
are just trying to get their children in to receive whatever care that they need because the school says, well, if they don't, fix this behavioral problem, I don't know what we're going to be able to do. And so parents especially call frantic and just, someone please help us. And I've built a practice where we serve an eclectic group of people. I have an eclectic staff from just different cultural backgrounds, but also different specialties and niches so that we can do our best to serve our communities at large.
Mm. My question right off the bat is, how do you service everyone? How do you practically do that? What does that practically look like?
So I do want to say we don't serve everybody. We can't serve everybody, but not because I haven't grown the practice to accommodate as many people as possible, but because there are certain diagnoses and certain areas of treatment that we as an agency are not necessarily equipped to be able to handle. So anybody who needs a higher level of care, hospital level care, we would not be able to serve. Anybody who's actively using and abusing substances needs, rehab and detox and things like that before they would be able to come to us. But that aside, the way that I've built this is, so this group practice, I had the pleasure of having a really wonderful mentor back in 2017, 18, 19, those years, who took me under her wing in her practice and helped me understand the kind of clinician that I wanted to become, but also understand bits and pieces of how to run a business like this.
Hmm.
And when she was ready to retire, she approached me and said, would you like to come up with some kind of an arrangement where I can retire and you can take this and grow it into something that I know you can turn it into? And so that's what I did. And at the time, we were very child focused. So I had good relationships and rapport with the local schools, and they knew who we were. They knew that we worked with children. And then from there, I wanted to hire and bring on people who did more than work with kids. I was seeing that the kids weren't the only ones struggling, but the parents were. And from there, it turned into, okay, well, it's not just young kids, it's teens. And teens turn into college students, and college students turn into adults. And just, seeing the different challenges that people on Long Island and and in Manhattan we're struggling with, and people moving to the city, and city is a big place and with a lot of people, and it can feel really lonely. And so it just became something where I wanted to make sure that when somebody called, we were able to say, or I was able to say, I have a clinician that I think would
Mm.
work really well and align with what you're needing right now.
What are you particularly looking for in your clinicians when you're taking them on?
That is a really great question. So I have two sets of criteria, honestly, because on one list is the clinical list, and then there's also just the employment piece. And so I'm looking for people who can think critically. I'm looking for people who have effective and solid decision-making capacity and skills, people who can think outside the box a little bit. Not everybody that comes and sits across from you is going to be a case study that you read about in a textbook when you were in graduate school. You need to be able to kind of piece different things together. Other things that I look for in the clinicians that I bring into my practice are people who are eager to learn, people who are open to different kinds of clientele and experiences, and willing to grow with a practice like this one. This practice has grown from when I originally took this practice over in 2021, 2022. Ooh, I don't even remember, but right around there. When I originally took this over and I purchased the assets of my mentor's practice, we were between 5 and 7 staff members, including some administrative staff. We are now closer to 30.
Wow.
And all of us have a clinical role or a client-facing role in some capacity. And so whenever somebody's interviewing, I ask them what they're passionate about. I ask them if they're open to trying new things on for size, and that's worked really well for us.
Now, practically in that, what are some things you ask, and like what are things you're looking for? I know you actually just mentioned all the things, like particularly personality type, but like what are some tells in interviews that you're like, because the th- one of the hardest parts about, I guess, signing up for therapy and what you guys do in your industry is not only do you have to get people in the door, but then you have to make sure that they're a good fit with the people you assign them with.
Right.
So it's like almost a twofold sales process because
Yeah.
not only, it's very different. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of places are just getting people. It doesn't matter if you like the cashier at the takeout place, you're gonna buy the food regardless. But it's very
Right.
different with you guys where you have to now like the person you're working with going forward.
Yeah.
So that being said, what are you looking for? Like, how do you tell? Like,
Now that's
these are
a
all great things that you mentioned before. Like you were looking for all these personality types, but like, how do you tell? Like, you're interviewing me right now. What do we meet? Like, what? How do you look?
No, that's a really good question, and it's one of the things that I think I'm really good at, but it's also one of those things where are you good at anything, but you don't know how to explain how you're good at it. And so
Sure.
I almost want to say like, yes, I know how to do this, but also I I'm a very intuitive person, and I don't make every decision, intuitively. I do, my research with certain things, but when it comes to people, I'm good at people. That might sound
It's
strange,
your
but
job.
yeah, I'm I'm good at people. And you're right, it's not just an initial sale. I hate to talk about it in this way, but from the business entrepreneur side of things, it's not just an initial sale, it's also retention. It's
Mm,
about
yeah.
making sure that the person that a client is sitting across from can say very strongly, I trust the person sitting across, even if it's a kid or if it's a parent of a child. I trust the person sitting across from me. I want to be open with this person, and this person can help me grow.
Mm,
And so when I'm interviewing somebody, I will ask them about themselves just as much as I'm asking about their skills and can they, write a, appropriate treatment documentation. It's not just about those skills, but are they able to carry a conversation in the interview? Are they able to actively listen and remember some of the things that I'm sharing with them about the agency that they're applying to work for? Did they do any research before they came? One of the biggest things that we do as clinicians is it's not just in session that we're spending the time
hmm
with you. We leave that session, we go home and we're looking up some of the things that you talked about. I can't tell you how many teens have educated me on new language. um, and but it's not just that. It's what are things that people are interested in? What books are they reading? What shows are they watching? What characters in those books and shows resonate with them and their experience right now? So it's not just, and I mean, there's also clinical things that we're looking up, like certain modalities and exercises that might be useful and helpful. But it's also, how can I really get to know the person sitting across from me as a clinician on a deeper level?
Mm.
So if somebody in an interview comes prepared with, I read your website and I was very much aligned with your mission to do XYZ,
Sure.
or, the services that you provide here. I see that you offer a workshop or a group that is for this specific group of people. That really lines up with something that I would like to do. In fact, I even have some of my own ideas. And so somebody who's able to come in and I can just see their passion and I can see how excited they are, not just about the work, but about the people that they would be serving
Yeah.
if they work here. One of the things that I think, and this is more of in business, you can't just love what you do. You have to love the people you serve, especially if you're in a people serving
It's a
industry.
great takeaway.
I love what I do, but I love the people
Mm.
more than what I do. What I do, you were talking about music before we started recording, and you can play, you can perform till your heart's content. But if that starts to feel like work, or if that's, I mean, it is a job, but if that starts to feel monotonous, if that starts to feel just the thing that I do every single day, I wake up and my session starts at this time, or I'm getting on stage to perform at this time, and you don't love your fans or you don't love the clientele that you're serving, you lose the passion for what you do. Because what you're doing is, you're not doing just for the sake of doing it. You're doing it for the sake of the people that you serve.
Yeah,
And if you
absolutely.
don't love the people, what
I
are you
think
doing?
that's a really, really great takeaway. I think that a lot of businesses can benefit from just that concept alone, because I think they focus just on the tacticality of their business. Oh, how can I be a better musician? How can I serve more clients? But it's
Mm.
really, it's that's really a selfish motive. And we want to grow our businesses and stuff like that. But the concept of like better it is to give than to receive. Like when you're serving the clients and actually loving the clients, you're serving that. It's really about them than it is more is about you. And then it comes back, because if you love them and you do a
Yeah.
good job for them, what are they going to do? Tell their friends and tell other people, hey, you have to go to this company. So it really comes and pays you back, in a kind of backdoor kind of way. But I really like that a lot.
Thank you.
I have a kind of loaded question for you.
Okay. I'll brace myself.
What do you think people could actively do to stay out of therapy? Now, my question for you, the loaded question is, as a society, and I want to say this, I have absolutely no problem with therapy. I, in fact, myself just started therapy in March this year. It has been genuinely life changing. My mom and sister, like I said, are therapists. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm curious, though, as a society, we have more and more and more and more people are going, which is totally fine. But I'm curious that my question is almost more of like, what do you think is causing that? And what do you think we can proactively do to better our mental health? To hope not necessarily stay out of it. I'm not saying people shouldn't go, of course. But like, what are we? That was kind of my headline question to kind of catch people's attention.
No,
But
I
do you
like
kind of
it.
get what I'm saying?
I absolutely, and came to the right person, I think. So I do think that, I don't know if my opinion is going to vary from other professionals in my industry, but I don't necessarily think so. I think that we have become, and I'm not speaking to a particular generation of people. I'm not speaking to, this is just everybody. I think that we're less resourceful than we used to be.
Interesting.
I think
In what
that,
sense?
in the sense that I think some people look to others to resolve the problem for them.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Or I think that sometimes it's easy to look for, why am I having this problem outside of myself? And that's not to say that we don't go through things that we struggle with, that are difficult things to deal with. The particular clinical work that I've focused on in my career is trauma. And so I'll be the first person to say that the people that I work with and have worked with are not at fault for the things that they experienced. And part of being resourceful is seeking out
Hmm.
therapy. And I think that there's a lot of, I'm not a social media hater. You won't necessarily find me personally on too many channels, but I think that a lot of people on social media are creating content that skews mental health language or overuses mental health language. I see videos of people self-diagnosing. I see people saying, I have a diagnosis of this, and if you experience this, you might also have this. A lot surrounding autism right now, given just things going on politically. And I think that information is important. I think it's a good thing to be informed. And I also think that there is such a thing as too much information out there and not, oh, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's not sourced appropriately. You know, rather than say, oh, if you experience these things, I'm not a mental health provider, but if you experience these things, you might have autism or you probably have autism. Maybe don't say that. Maybe say, as a person whose lived experience looks like this is what I go through. If you have questions, talk to a provider as opposed to just, you know what I mean? So, you know, kind of putting the appropriate disclaimers and things like that on there. But I think that I am a firm believer, and I tell my clients this, that you're not supposed to be here forever. That my job is to help you discover how resourceful you really are. It's to help you maybe discover patterns that you don't have names for yet in your life. And it's to help you develop a stronger sense of yourself, things that are already there. I'm just pulling them out. Things that are already there so that you can go about your day to day and go about living in the world as not a healed person. I don't know if everybody's ever healed, but as
Better off than you were.
a stronger version of yourself, a more resilient version of yourself.
I really like that, and I admire what you say very much. And something I'm gonna just be pondering a couple for the next couple days is what you said about the resilience of people and how we, at this point in our society, myself included, look outwardly for somebody to fix a problem than myself. Even as silly as it is.
I'm included in that. I'm not
No,
excluding myself. I'm not above it all.
you didn't say it in a way that was, condescending. I think it's just an awareness of society, um, myself included in the as the fact of like, I don't want to figure out this problem. I'm just going to chat GPT it, and like that's essentially kind of very similar to looking at how somebody else solving my issue, and that's really really interesting. And I don't know. I'm just gonna be thinking about that because that was a really, really interesting point. And again, it wasn't condescending. It's just a societal note because things have become so easy for us that it's like, well, like
Yeah.
why don't I just continue to find the easy route, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it
No.
can create problems.
It can. And I think just even that, the speed at which we attain information and the speed at which I think we think
Hmm.
something should be either fixed or we should be good at something, and then we give up when it's not as quick as we thought it should be. I think that that also just does us a disservice in that same kind of way, especially with ChatGPT and AI. I will be the first to say that I rely on it when it comes to just organizing some of my thoughts, and also be the first to say that I've seen it be incredibly problematic when brought into the therapy session. I've had clients say, or some of my staff have had clients say, you know, I'm struggling with this. And so I asked ChatGPT what I should do. And when we really tease it out, you realize that, you know, it's not a person. It can't think for itself in that sense. It's got a lot of information. Don't get me wrong. It is very, very smart, but it is still an it.
Hmm.
And when you present it with your information, you're presenting information from a biased perspective because it's yours. So of course it's
Sure.
biased. And so it doesn't know how to tease out certain biases, and it will give you answers led by your questions. So if you say,
Like an
I'm
echo chamber.
struggling with XYZ, should I do this thing because I think it's the right thing? ChatGPT and AI is probably going to say, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
and give you reasons why and back you up.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's kind of like the ultimate hype person.
Yeah.
In
Especially how ChatGPT actually spits together. That's a great observation, Jacob. You did, and then like, wow, thank you so much. Like,
right?
oh yeah.
All the time. Christina, that was very smart. Thank you so much, ChatGPT. It is. It's a confidence booster.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, so you have to learn if you're going to use AI in that capacity. And I'm not an AI expert, but if you're going to use AI in that capacity, you have to learn how to prompt it as opposed
There's
to
absolutely
just,
no question about that.
right.
I'm an avid user. I use it all the time, every day. But that being said, I've become very good at prompting it and getting on. I'm really important to me is not to create my own echo chamber. So I say,
Hmm.
think like this, or think like this, or am I seeing something wrong here? But where I was actually just speaking to somebody recently, and they're not very. They don't use it very often, and they were saying the way that they said, oh, I asked ChatGPT about this, and they read me the question. I'm like, well, you really have to give it parameters because he's like, I really feel like it's a skewed answer in this way. I'm like, yeah, because it's just pulling information off the internet, and right now this is what most of the internet is saying about that. But if you want to think outside of that,
Right.
or maybe about how things were 200 years ago, you have to tell it that way and like, hey, I want you to think in this, whatever. I'm curious. You mentioned something about not going to therapy forever. There's two schools of thoughts in that,
Hmm.
and I agree with your thought process. I do think that people can, again, not necessarily be healed, but be better off and more well equipped and to handle things themselves. Uh, then that's again, I think that, for example, my mom feels the same way. Who is, so I'm not saying she's right or I'm right or you're right. I'm
Hmm.
more so saying, where do you think those two schools of thoughts come from? One being you graduate, and the other being you're here forever.
So there are different there are many different clinical approaches to therapy. There are solution-based perspectives, and then there are psychoanalytical. And I think it depends on how you're trained and how you practice. I don't necessarily practice from a solution-focused perspective.
I don't know what either of those are, solution practice or psycho.
So, solution focused is kind of exactly how it sounds. You have a problem, let's focus on a solution. Let's go through steps A, B, C, D, and whatever, and get you from a place of I don't know where to go to clear path forward, and then you're out the door. And some people, that's all they need. And some people are not coming to therapy for complex trauma, like people that I typically work with. Some people are coming because they're dealing with a stressor at work and it's pretty right in front of them. It's this is the problem. Okay, here are my obstacles. What can we do to, work through, think through some of these things? And here you go. Now you've solved that problem and maybe you don't really need this anymore right now. But you've developed a relationship with somebody who you trust, who you know that you can maybe go back to if a different issue arises at work or somewhere else. And maybe that's what therapy winds up being for that person. It winds up being something that they go to when they need it. And then there's a different school of thought, which I don't disagree with either. I kind of agree with both. And I think it just depends on you, and it depends on you, meaning a client, and what you're needing. I do think that it's not a bad idea to start therapy when things are going well. And the reason for that is because you're developing a relationship with a person who's not in your day to day life, who doesn't know your friends, family, coworkers, siblings, the key players in your life in that kind of a context where they can form, different kind of biases. They're really just a person in your corner that you've developed this relationship with so that when something arises, you can go back to that person and say, hey, I need help with this, or I need perspective around this. And so I think that depending on what you're struggling with, what is going on in your day to day life, let therapy be something and let your therapist be somebody who might be in your corner for years, but not somebody who you're in therapy with every single week, back to back, never missing a week for 20 years.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have a couple of comments on that, and I'm curious, kind of like to piggyback on that, and I don't know which one I want to tackle first. But the first thing we'll talk about is almost this like old school. It's funny. I just actually had another mental health service on the podcast last week, and we were talking about very similar things. And one of the things she mentioned was the fact that uh, it's a very old school. There's a lot of old school thinking that kind of permeates into today, and very differently. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, it's kind of unbiased comment. Like
Mhm.
80 years ago, only the extremely mentally ill went to like any sort of mental services.
Mhm.
So now,
You also have to define extremely
of
mentally ill
course,
from 80
like,
years ago, because if you
well,
were
yeah,
a
sure.
woman and had a uterus, that you could have been
Well,
considered
yes,
extremely
yes,
mentally ill.
yes, yes. Fair. Okay, that's very fair. But my point with that is though is like it wasn't like as common, and usually the people that really needed genuine help. But that being said, they likely needed genuine help for a very, very long time
Mhm.
because a lot of the problems might not have resolved themselves. It was, they had some potentially some serious issues. That being said, if they were the only ones going to therapy at that or any sort of mental health services at that time, it doesn't necessarily mean that like as society changes and some people that don't need that extreme amount of help, that the actual industry shifts and says, hey, you don't actually have to be here forever. And I wonder if that's some sort of like, I don't know, Freudian kind of thinking.
I mean,
It was just a
maybe.
concept. I don't know. I was
No,
just thinking.
maybe, maybe. And I think that there is an old school, you know, s- psychoanalysis, Freudian. There is some of that old school, narrative to this where, oh, you need to come and see me 3 times a week for an hour. Oh, and by the way, here's what it costs.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that there's some old school mentality to that. And I think that, one of the things that I tell anybody that comes through in my practice is there is no one size fits all,
Yeah.
you know, mode of treating you or your child here. We get to know you, we get to know your family, we get to know your child, and we tailor our approach uniquely to that, to you, your child, just who you are as a human being, who your family is as a small community. And depending on what's going on, okay, you might need longer term care than, a solution focused 6 month, sort of let's solve your work problem kind of approach. You might need something that is ongoing, especially for kids. There are different ways to work with children depending on, what's going on, whether it's ADHD, behavioral challenges, or whether it's, anxiety and just getting in touch and understanding what's going on emotionally. So I can't really say there's right or wrong on either side. It really just is, what does the person sitting across from us need, and how can we do our best to
Yeah,
meet those
absolutely.
needs?
So that being said, kind of going on our conversation a little earlier, 10 seconds ago, about how like the old school mentality of mental health and only the extremely mentally ill go to get services. It's that permeated that stigma has permeated continually into today. And it's even as somebody whose mom and sister are therapist or social workers and work in therapy, I was terrified to go to therapy. Like genuinely had not been that scared of anything in a long time. And honestly, one of the only things that actually pushed me was like I have a 2.5-year-old daughter. I'm like, she's watching everything I do. And if I don't do something because I'm scared, I'm teaching her not to do something. And that was like the only thing that pushed me to actually go. Because I was so scared. That being said, what can you say about like the stigma and also like kind of like walking down that fear for some people?
I think that people are scared because they're afraid that, well, if I go to therapy, I'm admitting something's wrong with me. And most of the people that walk through, or everybody actually that walks through our doors, virtual or in person, nothing wrong with them as they're people. They're people that are struggling with something. One of the examples that I give all the time, and it's going to sound really dramatic, but somebody diagnosed with cancer doesn't walk around saying, I am cancer. But part of the narrative around mental health now, and that is very much perpetuated on social media, which I don't like, is we have taken mental health language and personified it.
Mm.
I am I am anxious. That's a feeling. But also, I'm an anxious person because I have generalized anxiety disorder. Or I am depressed. Yes, I'm experiencing depression as emotion, but now I'm also personifying I'm a depressed person. We've really much we I've spoken to people who really take on their mental health diagnosis or their experience that has led them to feel mentally unwell and make it a part of their character and make it a part of who they are. And No, you
Yeah.
don't walk around saying you have a physical diagnosis of something and personify that. Why are we doing that with mental health language?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that was something I was always super conscious of. I struggled with anxiety, which I then learned through therapy was actually OCD, which then led to anxiety. Um, but I am so grateful for it because I am doing so much better than I was. That being said, I was so conscious not to be like, or when I caught myself being like, my anxiety. No, it was. I'm not claiming it's not my anxiety. It's the
Right.
anxiety that I'm struggling with in this moment, and it's
Beautiful. Say that again for
the
all the
anxiety
people.
that I'm struggling with in this moment because it's not mine. I don't want it to ever claim it as mine.
Right.
It's something that I am struggling with, and I really hope and pray that it's and believe that it's not something I'll struggle with forever. But I never wanted to take it on as my identity and my personality and mine. It's not mine.
Yeah. And that actually, because to a question that you asked earlier, that is one of the reasons why I think sometimes people get stuck in
Mm,
therapy for a long time. Do I think that there are people who need treatment for long term? Absolutely. And there are people who I think just get stuck in the my anxiety, my depression, my trauma. Trauma is something that you experienced, an awful thing that you experienced, maybe consistently or continuously, but it's an experience. It's not who you are. There are things that you do when you are feeling anxious, when you are feeling depressed, when you are feeling triggered by something that reminds you of that traumatic experience that you had or experiences that you had. There are moments, right? Like you just said, this is what I'm feeling in the moment, not every part of who I am, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think that when people learn to change that language, they learn to separate
mm,
themselves from the entity of what it. One of the things that I've started doing, not that recently, but it's kind of come up actually a lot, is I have people give a name for whatever it is that it is, whether we're talking about anxiety, and when I say a name, I mean, is there anyone in your life that you never really liked, or someone from your past who every time you think of that person you go ugh. Name the thing, that person.
mm,
I've noticed how quickly people change their perspective on the anxiety, the depression, the triggers, the emotional experiences the emotions that they attach to the experiences. It changes perspective really quick because now you're looking at and you're identifying it not with you, but with something that you don't want in your life anymore.
mm.
And it's much easier to separate yourself from it.
What should somebody look for in a therapist?
That depends. I think everybody is unique, but generally speaking, somebody that you feel comfortable with. If you're looking for yourself as an adult, and as an individual, something that might be important to you is cultural identity. Finding somebody whose culture aligns with your own so that you don't have to rehash some of the
Mm,
nuances, that are unique to your culture. That might be really important. So, you know, if that is something that's important to you, looking for somebody that aligns or asking questions of the clinician that you are interviewing to see if you would like to work with that person and just say, this is really important to my experience. Is this something that you have enough information about? Or would I have to, talk about it with you in excess and where maybe that doesn't work? Some people don't mind that. Some people don't mind having to, explain more about certain nuances to their experience, where some people don't want to have to go through it
mhm.
because it's just
Yeah.
not part of the journey. Something similar would be maybe the age of the clinician. Now, I don't think that somebody's age necessarily is representative of their experience. However, I do think that if you are somebody within a certain age bracket who's looking for a therapist, ask yourself a couple of questions. Would somebody younger than me make me feel uncomfortable just because of the age gap? Would somebody my age make me feel almost too much like they're my friend? Or would that be okay with me? Would I be comfortable with somebody close to my age because they can relate to my experiences? Would somebody older than me feel like a parent? Do I need that? Do I want that? Or is that something that, all right, I would have to, again, explain a little bit too much about the
Mm,
nuances of my lived experience as a person in this age category to somebody who is older than me in
very
this sense?
interesting.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's just certain things to consider.
So I want to pivot and talk briefly about you mentioned that when you took this on sometime between 21 and 22.
I think January 2022 was the official. Here we
Oh,
go.
yeah, beautiful. So it's been almost 4 years at this
Hmm.
point. You had 5 or 6 people working. Not all of them were even clinicians practicing.
Hmm.
Now you have about 30.
Hmm.
How did you actively 5 or 6 times grow the business? What does that actually look like?
Oh my goodness, how much time do we have? Um, so when I first took this on and rebranded under, the Expressive Connections brand and everything, I I had a really clear vision of we have our cozy 4 offices here in Limbrook. We're serving the people that we're serving. We're doing really good work. And I think we can do better. I think we can do more. And so I started hiring pretty immediately. And honestly, the way that I looked at it was kind of like a puzzle. And, we've got this much room space and this many people using that room space. I'm essentially paying X amount in rent for only Y amount of time being used, the space is being used for. Let's first optimize that. And so bringing on new clinicians and taking on a couple of interns and, starting slow but fast as far as all of that went. And I did a lot of networking just with the universities where I went to graduate school and where some of my colleagues and staff went to graduate school and started there, and people liked working here. And so we grew really quickly. We kind of reached our capacity, and I had 2 options: to either stay stagnant, which anyone listening, watching that's a business owner or an entrepreneur, or you stay stagnant, you die. And so that's not how you really can't do that. So from there, I acquired more office space in the building, filled that up with clinicians, filled that we weren't hurting for business as far as, clients. And in fact, we were getting more calls than we had the capacity for. And I said it in the beginning, my goal still is no waiting list.
Hmm.
No waiting list. When somebody calls, if they are appropriate for our services, we get them in the door. And because I don't want to make people wait longer than they have to or like they're waiting at other agencies. I want them to get what they need. And so we took on more office space in the same building, and I hired twice the amount of clinicians because we had 4 offices over here, and now we've got 4 offices over there. And we did really, really well last year with those 8 treatment rooms and I think 20 therapists, and to the point where it was time to expand to another location in another area of Long Island. And we opened our doors in Garden City June 1st.
Wow, that's exciting.
Hmm.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very cool, and it's a testament to the work you put in, but also your capability as a business owner. So
Thank
I
you.
commend you for that. That's great.
Thank you.
I'm curious, you mentioned earlier that you have a great relationship with some of the schools. How, one, have you really formed those relationships with the schools to bring students in? But also, like, how do you get your name out there as a business?
So, because I took over an entity that has been in the community for many years, I we had a pre-established reputation that I had to maintain and not build from scratch. So I'm very fortunate in that arena not to have had to have start from the ground up and take something that was already working and just make it bigger. And so usually what happens is a lot of my business has been word of mouth referrals. Happy client tells their neighbor, tells their sister, tells their brother, tells their dog, tells somebody. And, when the time comes and when they're ready for those services, somebody new is calling and saying, my sister-in-law, brought their children here and my own son or my own daughter, my own child is struggling and can you help us? And so it's been a lot of word of mouth. And so with the schools, it's kind of the same deal. Our first location is in Limbrook, and so the pre-existing, relationship there in the community, they knew us, East Rockaway, those schools, and then again, a neighbor from a different school district, they come in, hey, it's going really well. So now a bunch of kids from Valley Stream or a bunch of families from Valley Stream are calling us, and it's kind of just built through this really wonderful word of mouth system.
Mm,
And that has been honestly the main way that I've gotten our name out there,
yeah.
just making sure that the work is good, the work speaks for
Mm.
itself, that the work is good. You said before, it's not just about the clients coming into the door for the first time. It's also about pairing with them with somebody where the work remains of quality. And so I think that we've
Yeah.
just really done that.
You may have mentioned this in the very beginning intro, and I might have missed it. But if I did miss it, or if regardless of that, what is your actual title?
So I'm the founder and executive director. My clinical title is licensed mental health counselor.
Okay. What is the difference between that and a social worker?
So we can pretty much do most of the same things. We can now make diagnoses. We can, provide the same kinds of treatment. Social workers, when they go through social work school, have a variety of options of things that they can do with their license. Not all social workers choose to pursue a clinical license like your mom and sister have their licensed clinical social workers, their LCSWs. When somebody graduates with their master's degree from a social work program, they start out as an LMSW, licensed master social worker, and those are individuals who can work toward a clinical license if they so choose, but don't necessarily have to.
Mm.
Whereas for my license, you're going in with the intention of there's nothing to do if you don't get a clinical license. So you're
Mm.
going with the intention of always pursuing becoming a therapist for clients and gaining a clinical license.
How did you get into this industry?
That is a really good question. So I did my undergraduate degree at Rutgers University, and I was a scholarship athlete there. I originally thought that I was
What did you
going.
do or play?
I ran track, and I did sprints. As tiny as I am, I did it, and I did well. And so I originally thought that I was going to become a cop. I was going into the FBI, and I was going to become the
You
Emily
give that. You
Prentice.
do give that vibe. I
Yes,
could see that.
I was going to really embody Emily Prentice from Criminal Minds, and that was going to be my life. And then I failed a class in my criminal justice in the major, and I had two options. I could retake the class and get a better grade, or change my major. And so I sat with it, and I hated that class. I hated the class. I wasn't, and when I thought about it, I wasn't really in love with the major. And I was already minoring in psych. It was already something that I had the interest in. And so I changed my major. And then I took a look and was just like, well, now what do I do? I don't really know what I'm going to do with this major. So I reached out to, I think, every single professor in the psychology department with the same email. Big mistake. With the same email and said, hey, are you looking for anybody to, looking for any students to help you with, your research or your this, your that, And I sent the same email to everybody, which anyone watching knows, or hopefully knows, or now you know. Biggest mistake. Don't ever do that
Why is that the case?
because the psychology department or any department in a university or just industries are smaller than you realize. And so when you send the same email to a whole bunch of people who talk to each other, who probably go to happy hour together, who probably, case consult and it doesn't work out in your favor. But I had one professor answer me and say, why don't you come to my office? Here are what my office hours are. Let's talk. And I thought that he was going to interview me. I was like, great, somebody took an interest and they bit. And he just sat me down. He said, why did you send me that email? And I was honest because I'm about as transparent as it gets. I was honest and I was just like, because I don't really know where to go with this, but I know that I'm interested in this and I want to help people. I want to serve people, but I don't really know where to begin. And I read something that said I should probably get some research experience. And he looked at me and he said, no. And he sat with me for about maybe 2 hours, a few hours, and just went over career options. He said, what are you interested in? What do you do? Who do you want to serve? What exactly are you thinking that you might be passionate about? Okay, well, based on this information, you don't need to pursue academia and research. You could go get a master's degree, become a therapist, and serve people exactly the way that you're looking to serve people.
Mm.
And he really helped me find direction. I don't even remember his name, as awful as that sounds, but I don't even remember his name. But he that moment was so pivotal for me because one, it could have been the biggest mistake I could have ever made. Somebody could have, all of them could have gotten together and said, who is this crazy girl who just, is sending us all the same email? Doesn't she know not to do that? Doesn't she think that we all speak to each other and go, she's not really interested in what I'm doing. She just is looking to build up her resume, which a lot of people do. And you need to build up your resume. But somebody said, okay, this is somebody who's confused and struggling, and she just needs some guidance. And I don't really think she wants to do research. But let's just see if that's where we ended up. I ended up not doing research. I ended up signing up for an internship class, getting an internship with a school for kids with severe behavioral challenges and mental health diagnoses and challenges. And it kind of just took off from there. I went and I applied for my master's, and however, 10 years later, here I am.
That's a really interesting story, and I think there's a lot of insights in that. But I'm curious, I want to talk about briefly before we wrap it up, what the first steps are for people. Somebody that might be interested in your services or services like yours. Where do they start? Whether it be the parent looking for the child, whether it be the child or a teenager or adult looking for it themselves, what's the first next step?
If you're looking to pursue services from Expressive Connections specifically, I'm going to plug here.
Well, I mean, I would be disappointed if you didn't.
As we should, right? If you're looking for services through Expressive Connections for yourself, for your child, for your teen, for your marriage or premarital, whatever it is, or for your organization, because we also do corporate wellness as well, which we didn't really get to talk about.
Really? Tell me about that. Tell me about also premarital.
Sure.
So I only know about that through church. Is a lot of churches, including myself, offer, and not necessarily like the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church offers something, but like I don't know if it's necessarily actual. I don't know. I have never really heard, no shame on them, great things about that. But I've heard a lot of great things coming out of the one that I like. For example, the one I did with my church. That being said, I've never really heard of it outside of the context of this. So I'm curious what premarital counseling in the actual at a counseling service place. I don't know, organization.
Yeah.
And also the business one. So talk about both of those.
Yeah. So essentially, you don't have to be married to need couples therapy or to pursue couples therapy. It's essentially,
There's no question about that.
Right. And I think that it is a good idea for couples who are just looking for perspective and might not necessarily be exploring with their partners things that might be helpful to explore.
Important.
Yeah, it is. Just even from,
I've never heard of it outside of church. So that's really fascinating. So what are the things you cover?
So covering things from, let's talk about family planning. Have you guys had conversations around what both of your expectations are? Let's talk about finances. Have you had conversations about your finances? Who's in debt? What's your financial freedom number? Are we in a position where if one of us stays home to raise children, that works for us? Are we never going to be in that position? And financial freedom number, just coming back to that, is at what point will we be living a life that we are that we are financially comfortable with? Does it have to be where we make millions of dollars a year? I'm sure lots of people would be like, heck yeah, please. But that's not necessarily everybody's financial freedom number. Some people are very comfortable at a certain other number. And it's just important to talk about those things, because if one partner has an expectation of we need to be making X amount for me to live comfortably, but the other person is over here and saying, well, this is my comfort. Is this person going to have to come down, or is this person going to have to come up? Or do they come to meet in the middle in some way? So it's really about navigating really important conversations that I think a lot of people and partners don't necessarily know to navigate, and before taking the step of getting married and legally tying yourself to another person. I know there's more to marriage. I am married. There's more to marriage than that. But people laugh when my husband and I talk about how we have actively and continue to proactively talk about if we were to ever get divorced, or before getting married, if we were ever to get divorced. How do we want to navigate that? What are the boundaries for treating each other with respect? What are we going to do if we own property together? What are we going to do if we have a child together? How do we navigate the different stages depending on where we're at? And we don't talk about those things because we want to get divorced. We love each other very much. We talk about those things because nobody gets married with the idea of getting divorced. You get married with the idea of, I'm marrying this person and I'm going to stay with them till death do us part, right? And life happens, circumstances happen, and sometimes certain challenges you can't overcome and stay together. And so I think it's important to just have really hard conversations before you get to being in quote unquote crisis. And now you don't know how to navigate them. You don't know the other person's boundaries. You don't know your own boundaries. You don't know, all you know is that you're resentful
Yeah.
and you're angry.
What are the business business therapy?
Yeah. So, as a mental health practice, one of the things that we offer for businesses and organizations is corporate wellness programming. So, we offer things like lunch and learn workshops around communication, healthy communication in the workplace, around stress management, around burnout prevention, and all sorts of topics like that. And then we can create tailor-made programming for organizations depending on what they're looking for. If they're just looking for the workshops, great. If they're looking for something that's a little bit more consistent and continuous and involves group coaching or even individual coaching for leaders, middle-level management, we do that as well.
I might have a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you prevent that from being something that people dislike going to in the workplace? In the sense of like, there's all these like seminars. Oh, I gotta watch this video on blank, in the workplace, and people dread that stuff. So how do you prevent your company being that in the workplace?
So it depends on what an organization is looking for. And so I've done a wide range of these, right? I've done the workshops where I'm on video. I'm live. I have not done anything pre-recorded. And so I go on live on a Zoom and everyone's cameras are off. And that's where
Oh
there's,
gosh,
and that's
that's
where there's no
miserable.
engagement, right? And I said it
Man.
before, I'm good at people and I'm good with people. And so even with cameras off, I do encourage engagement. I don't just put on a PowerPoint presentation and say, look at these slides that I spent so much time on that you're not going to read or pay attention to. I focus on narrative. I focus on story. I focus on asking for people to engage, to answer my questions. And then this way I can at least present something that is, okay, well, you mentioned this, so I'm going to speak specifically to that. Anybody else have something that they want to add? And one of the things that I usually start off, joking, like, I know I'm a therapist, but I'm not your therapist. I'm not here to be your therapist. We're not here to do therapy. We're here to talk about your unique experiences for this. And and people usually laugh and they're just like, yeah, okay, yeah, because they hear, oh, some therapist is coming to talk to us about self-care. Okay, well, I'm just gonna, eat my lunch while I, also simultaneously answer these emails. And so
I think that title needs a rebranding because I would probably think the same
fair
thing.
enough. And so yeah, so it's been really cool though. I've had people ask me really fun questions, and I've even had a CEO come to one of the workshops that we did, and he asked a lot of really insightful questions about just how to just change some, cultural perspectives within the organization. It was really cool.
No, I think that's a really, really cool service, and I think that I've heard businesses having like chief heart or operator, like like in
I haven't heard of that, I'm not gonna lie.
and it's like the concept of like, hey, what's the pulse of the company, and how is happy workers produce more and unhappy workers produce less, and like
Right.
as fluffy as the chief heart organ is, like operator sounds. um, Culture is really important in a company, extremely
Yeah,
important, and if you have a really good culture, it can make or break your company. And I think that
it's
it
true.
might be, depending on the size of your company, it might be worth investing in.
No, it's true. And I think something that I'm doing that I think stands out from what some other people are doing. I've partnered with somebody who has her name's also Christina, and her organization is Carnelian Wellness. And the two of us, we've created a tailored immersive experience specifically for leadership, but also for the organizations at large. And what we're doing that is different than I think what a lot of other people who say I offer corporate wellness programming do. A lot of corporate wellness programs are reactive. Your employees are already stressed. They're already saying that, the self-care, work-life balance is not good enough and not strong enough. And what we're offering is preventative. It's proactive as opposed to reactive. A lot of companies sign up all of their staff for, annual calm app, subscriptions, or corporate massages. I'd love to work for someone, but corporate massages or gym memberships and things like that. Things that, hey, this is here, but it's reactive. Nobody's really using it. Hey, let's teach you how to, do these skills when you're already in a place of crisis, as opposed to, okay, let's identify some of the root problems here. Let's go in, pull out the roots, and now teach you new skills. Teach you ways to prevent this from becoming a problem again, as opposed to here's just a reactive webinar
Yeah.
to a problem.
I mean, goes back to the thought that you said earlier that potentially maybe people should start therapy in the good times, which I think is a really, really interesting concept, because there's a phrase that I've heard a bunch that I've applied to my life, and through church or through programs in church. They talk about like building relationships in the good times. For example, like, hey, why don't you just set up a call with a buddy once a week just to like shoot the breeze
Mm-hmm.
and just see how things are going. And hopefully most of the time things are going fine. But it's a lot easier to make the call when things aren't going fine, when you've talked for 6 weeks about things going fine. As you know, and it's a lot harder to make the call, be like, hey, I'm really struggling, if there's no relationship built. So it's like
Yeah.
this a concept of just like, hey, just call your buddy while you're driving to work and be like, hey, just how's it going? And I've built that. I have this guy that I call just a friend that we call. I mean, I have a couple of people that I call regularly, but there's one guy every Tuesday at 7:30 a.m. We just hop on. Hey, how you doing, man? How's your week going? And
I
and
love
it
that.
it's also really cool because you see the progress in people's life, and it's encouraging, and they
Yeah.
see the progress in your life that you don't necessarily see, which is very kind of like a therapist, but
And no,
and
but
I'm
but
speaking as
that's
somebody who goes
but
to
coming
therapy.
coming back to, being resourceful, what we were
Yeah,
kind of talking about before, that is, you have people in your community who love, care, and or can be there for you if you open up that doorway
yeah,
for that mutual respect. And not everybody in your life is going to be as receptive to that 7:30 a.m. phone call every Tuesday, but you have this person who is, and you also have a clinician who, helps you with, through clinical struggles and things of that nature. But you've also got somebody in your support network, in your corner, that
yeah.
is, and that's reliable and consistent, that every Tuesday morning, 7:30, unless there's an emergency or somebody said, barring, specifics, but that is resourcefulness.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody can be resourceful. I think that sometimes with, everything being so instantaneous and instant gratification, I think sometimes we forget how to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or we're not used to having to put in the work for something, like even the
Hmm.
relationship. Like it takes time and work and effort.
Yeah,
And I've been with my wife and girlfriend at the time, now wife, for 15 years. So like that took a lot of time, effort, happy
yeah,
times, sad times, angry times to get to where we were. And like we forget that in order to develop not necessarily a relationship of that depth, but like any sort of relationship, it takes time and effort. And we
absolutely.
kind of are in this microwave society of like, well, I don't really want to put in the time. So
No, absolutely. I've been with my husband for between, dating and married, uh, almost 10 years. And we've been through hell and back in a lot of ways. When I first took over this, or when I was just about to take over this practice, we were living in a basement apartment that we couldn't afford to live in, and a basement apartment in somebody's house that flooded, actually, and we had to move all of our stuff out back in with my parents. We lost a whole lot of our belongings, and like I said, we could barely afford that. And now we have reached heights that that version of me never thought that we would get to. I've grown this practice to something that I'm so proud of. I love everybody that we work with client wise. I love everybody that is part of this team, and we're doing really wonderful, wonderful things. And it took a lot to get from flooded basement apartment with virtually no money to where we are now. And it took, and it still takes effort every single day.
well, last question I want to wrap up with is, what is something that you know in your career now that you wish you knew when you first started out with?
That the language of business is accounting.
Elaborate, please.
that you can. And at first, I just thought I had to be a good clinician to run a business. And no, that's not
Hmm.
how this works. I think that that helps. And I think that, everything that I said before about loving the clients and loving the work, like that's so much a part of it because when that's there, you don't really have to put as much effort into that. But business, business is numbers. Business is knowing your metrics. It's knowing your finances. It's knowing when you can afford to expand into a new location. It's knowing when you can afford to hire somebody new. It's knowing when you can spend X amount of dollars on marketing. It's knowing when you can work on your business rather than for your business. So I think that if I had known, and don't get me wrong, people told me this, my husband being one of them, and he'll watch this and be like, Christina, and I think if I had really listened when people told me that in the beginning, I have no regrets. I don't think I would do anything differently. I think that I needed to go through and make the mistakes that I made and still making. But that is, I think, the biggest lesson that I have learned as a business owner, that the language of business is accounting.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been super interesting, really insightful. Just I think learning about your industry, also learning about your business and just the insights that you've had. So thank you so much for taking the time. It has
Thank you
been
for
an
having
absolute
me.
pleasure, and I look forward to seeing where you go and the growth of your business. So thank you.